I don't know, you're just going to have to put some there. We got some more space over here, I guess. Let's see, I need to go to the computer. Wow, I haven't even pulled up the right PowerPoint program here yet. You guys got me so excited. I get so excited. Oh, I am already?
Say something exciting.
Oh, hey, this is Mike Young, leading the Using Men's Ministry to develop a growing, sustaining men's ministry at your local church. I'm sorry. I got to concentrate on this. What's that? Yeah, they might have to. Ooh, there we go. All right, here we go. I'm sorry. All right, I'm Mike Young with Noble Warriors, leading Using Men's Fraternity to develop a growing, sustainable men's ministry here at Grace Church in Fredericksburg. I got the wrong date on the PowerPoint there. I just noticed that. Guys, I'm glad you're here because all of you are involved probably in men's ministry in some way at your local church. Is that true? Now, let's bellyache about that for a little bit. How many of you have observed that men's ministry is hard? Anyone had that experience? All right, good. Well, let's talk about why it's hard. Why do you think ministering to men is hard? Let's just go on and complain for a little while. What makes it hard?
Some of the guys feel they don't need it.
Wow, they feel they don't need it. All right, you know some guys like that? They think they got it all figured out? All right, what else? Time. Boy, they don't show up for anything. Time is a real issue, especially in this community. And I want, if I fail to address that before we get to the end, bring it up because I got some ideas for you, especially as it relates to men's fraternity. All right, what are some other issues? Cooperation. What else? Commitment. Okay. What else? They're afraid. Wow. You know what? A lot of guys carry around a big old bag of junk with them, don't they? And they're afraid if I get too close to some other guy, they're going to know about my junk. And I don't want anybody to have any ammunition against me. You see that? You feel that? What else?
Bad past experiences.
Bad past experiences. A lot of guys get all ramped up for men's ministry for something to happen and then nothing happens and they get a bad taste in their mouth. And every time something fails, the momentum or the energy required to get it started again is very difficult. It's increased. You guys have seen that. Now, have you noticed that women's ministry just kind of blooms like weeds wherever they have a chance to try and do something? Have you noticed that? Yeah. Why is that so?
Because they have a good relationship.
Absolutely. Women, for the most part, are relationship driven. Men are not relationship driven. We're more driven by tasks, aren't we? We want to do something. But let me tell you what I see in that is although we sense that we're task-driven, men need relationships. Do you agree with that? Yeah. Now, we run away from them, and one of the reasons we run away from them is because a lot of guys have not had very many good relationships in their lives. Do you see that? So they're afraid of that exposure. Now, what else with women's ministry? What makes that seem to flourish?
Church is more friendly to women.
Yeah, church is more friendly with women. Let me put in a plug. I don't have the book in here, daggone it, but if you pick up David Murrow's book, Why Men Hate Going to Church. If you're involved at all in men's ministry leadership, you need to read that book. It's available in the church bookstore here, David Murrow. As a matter of fact, he and I emailed back and forth each other a couple of weeks ago. David Murrow, Why Men Hate Going to Church. You need to read that. The church is more friendly and comfortable for women and children, okay? But here's one of the things that I say all the time. When you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you read about what Jesus did and how He lived, are there women there? Sure. There are a few. As a matter of fact, Jesus had a very countercultural view of women in the way He treated them. It doesn't take much of a study to figure that out and see that Jesus wasn't about having women down and underfoot. I mean, He elevated women. What about children? Are children in the Gospels? Did Jesus encounter children? Yeah, a couple of times. Sure, ministered to children. Well, let me ask you this. Who did Jesus Christ spend His time with? Who did He build His church with? Who did He entrust the kingdom to? And what are we doing with it? We're tossing it aside. Now, how are we going to get that back? And please understand, I'm not advocating that we got to wrestle the church or the kingdom away from women. A lot of ladies get all nervous about that. But here's what I'm saying. Men need to step up to be what God designed them to be. To live the way that that God designed us to live. And our example for that is Christ. Now let me tell you a quick story. You've heard I've got 3 sons. And I want my sons to understand that our model for manhood is not anybody that they see on TV or in the movies or watch on the video games or anything like that. Our model for manhood is Jesus Christ. Now, the church even doesn't do a good job sometime of portraying Christ as a man that my warrior-hearted sons would want to follow. Do you see that in the church? And I'll give you something else. How many of you are pastors in here? I might get in trouble with a couple of pastors because I got to tell you, I think sometimes pastors think they're doing an adequate job of discipling men from the pulpit. And I think men need to be discipled outside of the pulpit where they can be talked to about what manhood really is. Let me tell you something I did. I work with the 4th and 5th grade boys at my church on Wednesday nights. And it was the night before Easter, the Wednesday night before Easter. And I brought in some 8-inch spikes. And we talked about Jesus being nailed to the cross. And I had a 6x6 there in the room with the boys. And I put my arm down. And I had 10 little boys, they're 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, something like that. And I asked them to hold my arm down like they had to hold me down so that I could be nailed to that piece of wood. And I put a spike there. And they were all around me just and holding and grunting and trying to hold me down. And I tried to move and couldn't move. And I said, guys, let me ask you this. Do you think that if Jesus wanted to get off that cross, he couldn't? And I said, take your hands away, boys. Our Savior held his hand there. And let those soldiers nail him to that cross. He chose that for me and for you, little boys. And then I gave them everyone an 8-inch spike to take home. Now, their parents didn't like that so much, but there was a story behind it, okay? But here's what I'm telling you. We need to start showing an image of Christ that men can identify with. And we need to start talking about what is biblical manhood. Do you agree with that? Because the culture's got that confused, okay? Very much so. So, men's fraternity, I've said it before, some of you may use some other materials in your churches. I think, for me, based on what I've seen across the country, this is the product right now that is the best to reach men where they are and train them to understand what it is to be a godly man. Now, let me talk about this. I see why I have to put this up here? I get so excited I forget to pray sometimes. So I have to put it as a PowerPoint slide. Let me ask God to be with us. Father, I'm thankful for these men, and I'm thankful for the fact that these men lead men. Oh, that excites me. Because Paul told Timothy to entrust the truths that he'd given him to other men who would be able to teach other men. God, these guys are disciple makers. And this is how the kingdom will be built. So God, I pray that these men will have an idea or something, resources that they can take home that will help them be better disciple builders, better disciple makers, better men's ministry leaders in their local churches. God, just watch over our time and just use this to help us get some new tools to build the kingdom so that you may be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, let me ask you this. What are guys looking for? These were supposed to come up separately, but they didn't. And so we're going to talk about them. And I've even got some note pages that you can write some notes on. Here's some of the things that I think men are looking for. Men need a safe place where they can realize that someone understands them and they're not alone. Now, let me put some context to that. We just said that one of the things that keeps men's ministry from developing is because guys are afraid, okay? Now, they're afraid because they're afraid that if I tell somebody something, they're going to have some ammunition against me. But that doesn't mean that they don't need to say those things. It just means that they need an environment where they can talk about that. They also need to know that they're not alone. How many of you have ever at your life thought that you were the only one in the whole wide world that was dealing with financial trouble? You been there? You're the only one that feels like you and your wife aren't communicating. Everybody's marriage is fine, but mine's on the rocks. Any of you ever felt that way? Yeah. And what is Satan doing with all that? Satan tries to cut you away and put you by yourself because he's going to use isolation as a tactic to get you. So men need to understand that they're not the only ones that have had these issues, okay? Men also need a clear, compelling vision of what biblical manhood is. If I were to stop right now and say, hey, what is a definition of a man? How would you define manhood? What would you tell me? What is a man? When do you become a man? When you drink your first beer? When you get your driver's license? That's right. When you become responsible, when you can take on responsibility, that's a big issue. But I got to tell you, there are lots of folks who say that first beer, that first girl, there's a whole lot of things out there that people use to define manhood, don't they? But listen, if you don't have a clear definition of what manhood is, it's easy to get lost, isn't it? And there are lots of young men out there today that have no idea what it means to be a man because the culture's not showing them a good picture, and unfortunately the church is not doing a good job sometimes either. All right? And the other thing is that men need time and other men to process their manhood. Now, as much as I might at some point find it uncomfortable to engage in a conversation with June, is that right? Here about issues related to how things are going with me. Do I need that? Absolutely. I need it, and I need time to do that. And I need some prodding to do that because most guys aren't just going to jump out and start talking about stuff, are they? So they need a platform to be launched from on there. All right? Here are 3 other things that men need. Men need some practical how-tos. Let me tell you why some of your men's ministry stuff is not going well. Okay? Clue number 1, and I'm going to step on some toes here, I'm sure. How many of you have a monthly breakfast at your church? How's that going? Okay? Let me tell you what? Yeah, very few churches are being successful with that right now. And most of the ones that are, the demographic that comes there are older men who have time, and they're coming, they hear a testimony, they get some breakfast, and they're not really getting information that they can use to apply to their lives, okay? Now that may not be the case with some successful ones. There's some good ones out there.
Brand new, we're building, on the principles because most of the guys that come are not.
Yeah.
They are new to
okay.
their walk.
So you're doing some things to really feed them.
Yes.
Here's the deal. How many of you like tools? Most guys like tools. They like gadgets. They like something that they can walk out of here and do something with. And so part of what's going to make men's ministry successful is to give guys some tools and some strategies and some resources that they can go out and put into action immediately. That's one of the things that we find with men's fraternity. They also need male cheerleaders. Now, what's up with that? Why do we play the Rocky theme and give away a trophy at these conferences? Recognition, celebration, excitement. Guys like, absolutely. How many of you played high school sports? How many of you played basketball or football? Let me tell you something. Did you think about the fact that those cheerleaders were over on the sidelines if you were a basketball or football player and they were cheering? Wasn't that kind of neat to know that they were over there at times? Yeah. Yeah. But we like cheerleaders. We like people that celebrate with us. And we need some guys that are going to celebrate when we do the right thing. Don't we? We need that. And men need a sacred moment when they know they've become a man. You know what? How many of you, now when did you become a man? How do you answer that question? If we don't know the definition of manhood, then how can we know that we are one? Or that we know how to live like one? Most of us are guessing on that, aren't we? And then we feel like we have some maturity, so we're okay in that. But gosh, does it make a difference if you could say, I know that I've been given a challenge and a charge, and I know what a man is, and I'm going to live to that. Wow. Now that sounds kind of hokey. I got to tell you, it sounded hokey the first time I heard it. But let me tell you something. When I graduate a man from men's fraternity, and we have a celebration of his understanding of what true biblical manhood is, and he's got tears running down his face, that becomes real. Now, this is not about crybabies. This is about guys reaching an emotional point where they finally know what God made them for. That's powerful stuff. So let me talk a little bit about men's fraternity. Men's fraternity is a foundational building block for overall an ongoing disciple-making process for men, consisting of 3 series of weekly gatherings that address the basics of biblical masculinity and equip a man to manage his pursuit of Christ and God's purposes for his life. Now, that's a lot of wordy stuff, but here's the deal. This curriculum, and there's going to be another one that's better at some point, but right now, this is what I think is the best, meets men where they are, gives them a biblical foundation for how they need to live out their faith as a husband and father. Now, it's 3 series, and actually 3 years of curriculum. Now, most of you, if I were to tell you you're going to do a study with your men for a year, most of you would say, holy cow, my guys aren't going to do that. How many of you would have that reaction? Let me tell you what is absolutely amazing, is once guys get a taste of this, they want to keep coming. It is remarkable. I mean, you saw in just a few minutes that you were pulled into it. And I'll tell you more about why. The first curriculum is called The Quest for Authentic Manhood. And this deals with what is God's design for man. The second year of curriculum, this is 24 weeks. This is 20 weeks. No, this is 16 weeks. This is Winning at Work and Home. This deals with what is a man. This deals with where does a man spend most of his time. Men today spend 90% of their time either at work or at home. And most guys, if you really get down to it and you have one of those real gut level conversations with them, they'll either say, I'm not doing very well at work, or I'm not doing very well at home, or I'm not doing very well in either place. So this curriculum deals with how to do well, how to win in both those arenas. But then there's that other part of life. Once you can figure out how to do life at home and at work a little bit better, a guy says, well, isn't there something more? And so the third year of curriculum, which is 20 weeks, is called The Great Adventure. And this deals with that adventurous spirit in a man's heart that wants to do something more than just go to work and go through the mundane parts of life. That resonates with men. That's why John Eldridge's Wild at Heart resonated with men. Now, each one of these you do 1 year at a time. And I'm going to answer some questions as you go along here or tell you what's going on. You don't have to start with year 1 in order to have a successful experience. You can start anywhere along the way. Year 1 kind of sets a foundation. But Robert Lewis, who developed this, would say, if I had it to do over again, this would be first. Okay? And the reason this one would be first for him is because it's shorter and it really puts its hooks into where guys are struggling right now. How many guys in your congregation would say, hey, we got a rocky spots in our marriage from time to time. So they would like some help there. And some guys would say, hey, things aren't going so well at work. I'd like to be doing better there. So this automatically gets guys' attention. So those are the 3 series of curriculum. All right, I'm going to give you this chart here, and I'll tell you what, this material or this information is actually put together for you here, so you haven't got to fill all this in. The names of the curricula you've already seen. Whoa, I went the wrong way. The Quest for Authentic Manhood, Men at Work and Home, Winning at Work and Home, and The Great Adventure. Now, just follow along on your sheet there. The focus in Men's Fraternity 1 is a man's core identity, then chief responsibilities, then chosen destiny. This is what we're covering in each of these curricula. The chief elements, got that middle slide in there. In this one, I'm going to spend a little bit of time, a man's wounds. The video that you were watching when some of you came in the room is called Remembering Dad. The one wound that almost every man deals with on some level is the father wound. If you could dig into a man's life and ask him some questions about what his relationship with dad was like, if you dig deep enough, you're probably going to find there's some friction there somewhere. How many of you went through rocky patches with your dad? It's almost universal. It's almost universal. And listen, there are some scholars and some psychologists out there who will say that the most important thing that a man can do in his life is forgive his dad. That's amazing. That's amazing, amazing. So the father wound is one wound. The overly bonded to mother wound is kind of interesting, and that's the idea that sometimes mom has a tendency to put herself too much in control of a boy's life. Have any of you ever known a young man whose mom just kind of hovers over him and controls him? And when he finally gets married, the poor young lady that marries this boy marries his mother too. You seen that? And listen, you know who needs to deal with that? That young man. He needs to stand up and take responsibility in that relationship. And an overview of manhood, a definition of manhood, an overview of manhood issues. In the next one, it's how a man enjoys his work and how a man relates successfully to his woman. All right, and then the third one is rediscovering the adventure of life, understanding how God designed you and developing a satisfying life focus. What am I going to do with my life? God, what'd you make me for? Now, looking at these things, do you think those are issues that would resonate with men? Absolutely. This is the real deal. It's incredible stuff. The major challenges here is that the boy in you must die. You remember what 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, or 13:12? When I was a boy, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I thought, reasoned as a child. What is it? I thought as a child, I reasoned as a child, spoke as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Now listen, how many 50-year-old guys do you know that never put away childish things? You know any guys like that? You know 50-year-old boys, 40-year-old boys? I know lots of 30-year-old boys. And so here's the deal. Part of what we need to do here is the boy must die. You got to step forward and be a man. Man up. Calling you out. And the man here must step forward. If you're going to be a man, and a man wants to identify himself as someone who has a family and provides for that family, then you need to be doing a God-sized job of that, don't you? So this one calls the man out to step forward. And then the third one says, but there's a sense of adventure in you that kind of gets dumbed down by the day-to-day grind, and we need to reinvigorate that. And there's some guys for whom that really resonates. All right, and then the passion in the three of them is seizing your manhood, establishing your manhood, and maximizing your manhood. So that's just a quick overview of the three curricula. Now, before I go into this next part, I want you to flip over. Are there extra pages of that one? I want you to flip over on the back side of this. These are the seminar, or the titles, the weekly titles of the lessons in the three men's fraternity curricula. When you look at the quest for authentic manhood, the four faces of manhood, unpacking, remembering dad, the mother wound, the all alone wound, the heart wound, the good news solution to the heart wound. One of the things that's interesting about Robert Lewis is in each one of these curricula, about midway through, he does a very credible presentation of the gospel and asks men who aren't walking with Christ to accept Him as their personal Savior. Powerful stuff, and I've seen men, tears running down their face, saying, Mike, I just prayed that prayer with him on that video. Now, it doesn't make any difference if you've been a Christian for 40 years or you're not a Christian. These issues resonate with men. And then the second curriculum, authentic manhood, winning at work and home, look at those. What men need to know about women, engaging your woman successfully, staying close to the woman you love, improving your sex life, that's always high attendance week. How a man makes the money work at home, the good life and where to find it, what dads need to know, dad's game plan for raising sons and daughters. Hey, this is instruction about how to be a man. And let me tell you something. One of the reasons that we're failing in men's ministry is we're not doing this type of stuff. I spoke at a church, I guess it's been 18 months ago, actually less than that, probably 13, 12 months ago, I don't know. And I went in and I talked about this manhood stuff at this church. It was an African-American church down in Chesterfield, Virginia. And the guys at the end said, Mike, all we've been doing is getting together every month for the last 15 years and arguing over who's going to cut the grass next. And finally, somebody's come in here and talked about what it means to be a man. And you know what? That's what we've been doing. We've been wasting our time, spinning our wheels, distracting with stuff, and we haven't gotten to what it means to be a man in most groups. And this does it. That's why it's so important. And then you can look down the ones at the Great Adventure. One of the things that's neat about the Great Adventure is you have an opportunity to go online and take a personality inventory and a skills inventory and get a report back, like 14 pages that explain how God wired you. And most guys have never done anything like that. Now, some guys have because of the work environments that they're in, but wow, to have feedback about God's design for me is pretty cool. So that's a little bit more detail about what's in these curricula. All right, curriculum characteristics reaches believers and seekers. It's presented on DVD or taught live. Now, I got to tell you, I have taught this live. I have done and said the things that Robert Lewis is doing, but I don't do it as well as he does. So what I've started doing is just using the DVD. And it works well. It captures men at their best time of year. The best time to start men's fraternity is in the fall, on the school calendar, okay? And to run it and not try to do it in the summertime. When I get groups that try to do it in the summertime, what happens to men in the summertime? They're distracted. There's too much going on. So listen, here's the deal. Instead of doing things for men in the summertime other than going fishing or something like that, just leave them alone. Let them take a break and really get back with them on a cycle that makes sense to them. Because who I'm passionate about reaching are those guys who have kids at home. Because the church is not reaching many of those guys who need that instruction about how to raise those kids. All right, the workbooks, and I've got a stack of these here that you guys could kind of pass around and look. I'll put some over here and some this way, and I'm just gonna grab one here. And these workbooks, if you look at them, these have got some answers in them. You guys can grab those. If you look at one of these workbooks, you can open to any one of the sessions, and there's fill in the blanks where guys can fill in the information that's, and you just have to look at it for a little bit and pass it along. They fill in the blanks as they go through the PowerPoint, as Robert goes through the PowerPoint, and then there's always discussion questions. All right? Now, what happens with that is Robert has set guys up by presenting some information, telling some stories about himself, and then, for example, in this one about remembering Dad that you were watching a part of, the first question is, give 3 words that you think of when you think of your dad. Now, that's soft enough that most guys would do that. But what happens is, over the course of time, as guys discuss some of this material, they begin to get to know each other. Do you see that progression? And as they get to know each other, they begin to share a little bit more information. And as they open up a little bit more, they get deeper, and God begins to work in their lives. That's powerful stuff. The gospel is presented in each series, and it's renewable if done well. Now, let me tell you what's interesting. This has been going on in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I apologize to you. They were supposed to send me some material, but it didn't get here. So I want to get your names and addresses, and I'll send you a follow-up packet of Men's Fraternity, a promotional DVD, and some other information. But in Little Rock, Robert Lewis started this about 15 years ago because his men said, hey, we'd like to do something for men. Well, the first year he had about 40 guys. The next year he had about 300. The year after that, about 700. And right now, on Wednesday mornings in Little Rock, Arkansas, at 6 o'clock, there will be anywhere from 1,100 to 1,400 men sitting in a church sanctuary to be taught men's fraternity at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, they've been doing this same cycle for 15 years. They do the quest, then the next year they do winning at work and home, then the following year they do the great adventure. And you know what they do the next year? The quest, winning at work and home, and the great adventure. Now, some of you would say, well, our guys would never do that. Our guys would not go for having the same things because they got this been there, done that mentality. How many of you would be afraid of that? Let me tell you what happens. Let me tell you what happens to guys. If you get to them, what a guy will realize, 2 things. If he goes through this, many of them will say, gosh, I know so many guys who need this. And what they'll do then is they'll go out and get their buddies and bring them back in so that, now you have to cultivate this. You have to make them think that way. But they'll go get their buddies and bring them in to experience what they've experienced. The other thing is that if they're sharp, they'll realize 3 years from now, I'm in a different place than I was this time. And they'll be able to do it better. Now, let me also give you another thought that I love in all of this. Why do you think we have the parables that we do in the Bible? You think Jesus only said those once? You think He only told the stories about the seed falling along the path one time and someone recorded it? He had a court stenographer there that got it word for word and that He only said it once? No. Why do we have those? He said them over and over and over again. And let me tell you something about men. We need to circle back and hit the basics over and over and over and over again. How do you become an 80% free throw shooter? Just shoot once a day? No, over and over and over again. Guys need to hear these things over and over and over again. And if you establish that cycle and just keep bringing it to them, it's amazing. I've got guys who just finished winning at work and home, and they're saying, Mike, I want to go through it again. I want to go through it again because I know there are things I missed. And so if you do this well and you plant the right seeds in their minds, you can recycle this. You can come back around again, and it's worth doing. Okay? Now, let me stop because I can rattle on forever. What questions that you're thinking of right now? And I may or may not get to some of them. What do you got a question about? Yeah.
I have two, actually. One is the difference of the effectiveness of generations. We have a church of a great number of retirees that are in great health still. They're very active. And we have a whole bunch of these young fathers that you just talked about. The young father's life is up early, out the road, the commute of central northern Virginia, versus guys who have more time to do something that we. So at some point, you're going to talk about scheduling of this, because that's what I'm really grappling with.
Yep. And I'll go ahead and deal with that now so that I don't miss some of the things that you're interested in. First of all, getting those two groups of men to talk to each other is absolutely huge. Do you understand that? Because the older man begins to think, hey, I have no value anymore. I don't know what to do with myself. That's not everyone, but many of them think that. I don't know what to do with myself. And the younger man is saying, boy, I'm making so many mistakes. I wish somebody would tell me how to do this better. And so to put them together in a room and say, okay, you guys need to talk, is that going to happen? No. But if you can show a video where a man talks about the mistakes that he's made, and then older men and younger men can talk together about those mistakes, you can begin to create that environment where that happens, okay? So a lot of times out of this comes mentor relationships. Now, the issue that you bring up, I am wrestling with trying to figure out how to deal with, okay? Because your culture up here, with so many people working in D.C. and leaving at 4 or 4:30 in the morning, it's going to be tough because the best time of day to do this is at 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? And it works in Richmond and a lot of other areas because that's the one time a day that a man can get away from home and not get grief from his wife about not being there. And if you give a guy something that is worthwhile, he'll get up at 5:30 so he can be there at 6. But the problem is in this environment, guys are already on 95 at the Quantico exit by 6 o'clock in the morning or before. Yeah.
The question I have, it's about the DVD itself, because one of the things that we're implementing is I just put our website up. And what we were wanting, we have so many of these people, the 4 o'clock in the morning guys. Does the licensing allow you to do a video stream off of that?
Good question. And here's what, as a matter of fact, I'm going to see the national representative for this next week, Rick Caldwell. And the videos for these are already on the web. If you go to mensfraternity.com, and I'm going to take a right turn here and show you that website. If you go to mensfraternity.com, it's going to take me just a moment to get there. If you go to mensfraternity.com and go to the right place, the videos, all of them, are available online. Now, they cost $3 to do it, to view a single video. Let's see. View a session. Watch the videos. Now, here's where you can go down and get the requirements. And it's about purchasing. You have to watch 5 times within a 30-day period, create an account, and all that stuff. Now, you're asking, can I take these videos and post them on my website? I would say probably not, because of the proprietary licensing and all with that. What I'm going to present to Rick Caldwell when I see him in Nashville next week is, Rick, could we get a church license where a church pays X amount of dollars and each man in the church could watch the video? They've got a code and could watch the video at their time or location for a specific amount of, within a window.
Right, that's what I'm setting up now.
Right. So the goal with that, and this is how I'm trying to come up with a solution for you, or could we download it to a video iPod, so a guy could sit on Virginia Railway Express and watch it as he's heading up to D.C. Okay? Now, I don't know what they're going to say to me about how much it would cost to do that or what the licensing would be like, but I think that is the solution that would work here. And then what would happen is you would still need to get those guys together face to face on Sunday night, but they wouldn't have to spend the 45 minutes watching the video. They could just go right to the questions. Does that sound like a reasonable solution to what we're up against? And the best I can tell you is, like I said, I'm going to be at the National Coalition of Men's Ministries Conference in Nashville next week, and I'm going to talk to them about this specific issue because I know it is a tricky issue. All right? Yes, sir.
Each of these packages,
Yes.
if you were presenting it to a men's group, excuse me, what if you have food to go along with it? Is that a possible failure or an added feature?
It's a good question. The groups that I run, we don't do food. We do coffee. Because guys can get food. I mean, they can stop at McDonald's, they can stop at Wawa or whatever. So all they need is coffee and give them this. And so I say that because you don't need to complicate it. And they've tried it that way. Some groups do that, and it's not that you can't do it, but we find that it's not necessary. Does that make sense? Because most guys, what I find with my groups that meet at 6 o'clock in the morning is they come in, if I give them a cup of coffee, we do an intro, we watch the video, we have a conversation, and those guys are gone. And then if they want to grab something for breakfast, they can. Some guys bring a granola bar or whatever. But to go through the hassle of doing breakfast is not necessary. It's an added bonus, but it's not necessary. Let me get back. Now, also, let me tell you, when I first found out about this, it was in fall of 2004. I bought the material, and in the summer of 2004, I went through this curriculum with two guys. That fall, I started 4 groups because I had started Noble Warriors. I was doing this full time. So on Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, and Thursday morning, and Wednesday night, I led men's fraternity groups. The next year, in the fall of 2007, there were 15 men's fraternity groups. I was still leading 4, but now 11 were being led by other men. Okay? That's how this is growing in Richmond. And then this past year, we had 40 groups going, and I only led 1. That's how it has picked up in the Central Virginia area. And we've got groups as far east as Tappahannock, as far south as Emporia. This is the Noble Warriors website. I don't know if you've been here or not, but I wanted to just show you. Here's part of what we've done. That's the map of how we have covered Richmond with men's fraternity. Now, what are we doing with that? And I'm kind of circling all around some things here. But the deal is, I can get a guy who goes to this website and say, hey, I'd like to do men's fraternity, but my church is not doing one, so they can go and hit one of these other places. And I would love to see us develop that network in Fredericksburg. Because here's one of the neat things. This is, it's the same. If it's in the Baptist church or the Methodist church, if it's men's fraternity, it's the same. So that's how we're getting to some of this cross-pollination in churches. Yeah?
How big do the groups get before you recommend splitting?
That's a good
What's the
question.
size?
Well, they can be as small as 2, because you got to have 2 to have a group, but I've heard of groups as large as 2,500. So it's not necessary that you split, okay? What happens, though, as the group gets larger, you do a better production of it. And so, for example, you could do men's fraternity in this auditorium, on Thursday mornings at 6 o'clock, and I know that won't work because of the other issues, but everyone watches the video for 45 minutes, and then when it's time to process the material, they just turn their chairs toward each other and have a conversation. So you have the large group teaching time, and the small group component just happens right there in the same space. We don't want to overcomplicate it. Does that make sense? Now, that's not to say that it can't be small groups, because one of the things that's happening right now, I got an email yesterday from a guy that's in my adult Bible fellowship class at my home church. He said, Mike, I need Winning at Work and Home. We're going to start on April the 20th. I got a bunch of guys that want to do this. He's running it in the basement of his house. And he's going to spend $300 to buy the DVD set so that he can run this program in his house. I've got a guy, the first year that I did the group, one of the guys said, hey, could I run this at my work? Absolutely. He's a vice president at First Market Bank. Some of you are familiar with First Market Bank, headquartered down in Richmond, works at First Market Bank. He's got a men's fraternity group that meets in the headquarters of First Market Bank on Tuesday mornings. That's cool. Let me tell you what's happening in Little Rock. They're running it in car dealerships. There's the owner of a car dealership, a Ford dealership, who got excited about men's fraternity. He was going to Fellowship Bible Church, Robert Lewis's church, and said, hey, I'd like to run this for my men at my church, at my auto dealership. Well, on every Tuesday night, they take everything off of the sales floor. They back all the cars out, and they turn it into an auditorium, put up the big screen TV, and on Tuesday morning, or Wednesday morning, they get the coffee pots going, and they do men's fraternity in the car dealership. His salespeople, his technicians, everyone comes in, and this guy is changing the environment in his business with men's fraternity. Isn't that a remarkable story? It's very cool stuff. Now, let me get back to this and make sure I cover the basis on this stuff. Ah, shucks. Okay. On this, typically weekly meetings, we want to do it on a weekly basis. Mornings are best, but I've got groups that meet in the evening. I've got groups that meet on Sunday night. I'm even thinking about doing a pastor's lunchtime group at my office during the school year, because pastors could benefit from this. As a matter of fact, it would be best if pastors were leading the group in the local church, but that's hard to get pastors to do just because of time constraints. The team. In order to do men's fraternity, you need a team. You need a host. This is someone who's going to stand up and welcome everyone, or just kind of be the coordinator for the whole thing, okay? You need a communicator. Now, the communicator can be someone who teaches it live, like I've done, or just, that can be Robert on the DVD. Or you can do what we call a bleed. And I used to do this. I used to start the sessions, and then I would say, but I want Robert to tell this next story. And so then I would play the video for the other half and do a combination. But what I found was Robert is so good at teaching this stuff that I just leave it to him. And then helpers and welcomers, the guys who help you do it, and a video and sound crew. You've got to have someone who can set up all the technical stuff to make it work. All right? Let's see. Essentials, the key to keep men coming, they have to be safe. And safety doesn't mean they're safe from physical harm. It means you have to be safe about having conversations about stuff, because you're going to get into some stuff here, okay, some guy stuff. It has to be predictable. The guys have to know that it's going to start on time and it's going to end on time. If you start not showing up and not getting started until 6:30 in the morning, what's going to happen to your men? They're not going to come because they can't trust you. Does that make sense? If you start keeping them until 8:30 before you turn them loose, what are they going to do? Not going to come. If you say you're going to start at 6, you better start at 6. If you say you're going to finish at 7:30, you better turn them loose at 7:30. Okay? They've got to know what they're getting into, and you have to do it in a quality way. Okay? You can't be running around at the last minute trying to make it all work. Keys to success. One of the keys is a pastor's involvement. Now, I got to tell you, from my personal experience, sometimes it's hard to get the pastors involved in something else. But I also have to tell you that from my perspective, and I'm just like a salesman selling whatever, I'm selling men's ministry to pastors. The most important thing that a pastor can do is disciple his men. Now, I believe that because I think that the church is going to be stronger. The health of the church is going to be determined by the spiritual health of the men. So I think a pastor ought to be investing in this, and so that's why the pastor's involvement is so important. Advanced preparation with the team, a commitment to quality, and prayer. You got to pray over this. You got to pray that these guys are going to come in, they're going to be ready to go, and they're going to be blessed. You do it 6 months ahead, and I'm going to press through this. Guys, if you wanted to start this in your churches in the fall, I would say buy the curriculum now. Buy the curriculum now and get a small group of guys, maybe 4 or 5 guys, and get them to go through it over the summer. Now, that's not your program. That's your leadership team. That's your committed guys, your core guys that are going to be willing to shoulder some of the load on this. Because I can tell you about this from now until 6 o'clock tonight, but it will not have as much impact on you or your men as if someone else would come in who's experienced this and seen the life change. Okay, someone who's been with the material. So your best promotion for a program like this in the church is to have men who've been through it. And they know what to expect. Does that make sense? You need to preview the material. You need to decide how you do it, live or DVD. And I got to tell you, I think for most of us in our fast-paced world, the DVD is the best way to go. Now, I'm going to say this. We've got a diverse audience here. And it is not lost on me or the folks in Little Rock that this is a white guy from the suburbs of Arkansas talking about manhood. And some of the cultural issues may not resonate with folks in urban environments or folks from different nationalities, folks from different backgrounds. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. Does that make sense? And I think that's a fair thing for us to discuss. And in your various groups, it's a fair thing for you to address head on. Okay? You know, he might say something that is perfectly reasonable for someone like him, but for someone not like him who hasn't had that particular type of life experience, you may need to process, well, how is my experience different? Does that make sense? So I think you go for those things head on. And here's another thing. The first year, you want to just work with your men, but then this can really become an evangelistic tool out in the community. Because let me tell you something. If you start talking about what it means to be a man, there are other people who want to know the answers to that question who aren't in your church. And so you can start putting it out there and bringing in more people. All right? Resources to help you win. Content, curriculum, and workbooks. You see the DVD sets come with the DVDs in them. There's also a workshop, set of workshop CDs or DVDs that show you how to do the workshop. And then there is a leader's guide, CD-ROM, that gives you information about how to, or gives you some of the hard documents. Every guy gets a workbook. Let me give you another great thing for men. There's no homework. That resonates with guys. There's no homework. So they just bring their books to class each week and they have a powerful experience. All right. Free things from Lifeway. I think. Free things from Lifeway, and I'll show you some more of this. Advertising samples, transcripts, movie and music suggestions. One of the things that's always neat is to play a movie clip at the beginning of the session. And so I go around and buy cheap DVDs, and like at the beginning of the season, I might play the liftoff scene from Apollo 13 or some scene from The Gladiator or Black Hawk Down or something, because that gets guys going and gets them to pay attention. Local coaches. You know, I'm going to begin to spend more time in Fredericksburg, and so one of the things that I would encourage you to do, if you're interested in this, let's get together and talk about it. And I probably would like to come up here and show you some more information about it sometime at a workshop. And so we talk more about it. Why it's foundational to effective ministry. It's for and about men. It's a discipleship process and incorporates all the ingredients that produce life transformation, addresses the core needs of men. It's renewable, reproducible, and expandable. Now what happens, you know, we just finished up Winning at Work and Home, and I've got a group of guys that I went through with this, and after this we did a book study, a book called Choosing to Cheat by Andy Stanley. Great follow-up book study, but what's happened with that is now all the guys who are in this study we're continuing to talk to each other. And we're getting deeper and deeper into accountability relationships, which is where you want to go to strengthen your men's ministry. All right? And here's some information. You can purchase these materials at the Lifeway store. You can call Men's Fraternity. When you call, I'm one of their field representatives, and you can say, Mike Young is my representative. You can order it from Lifeway, and you'll get free shipping. Okay? So So that's, now, let me talk to you about pricing. I mentioned that this is $300. It's $299. A lot of people say, whoa, that's a lot of money. Let me tell you what. Your ladies' ministry is spending boatloads of money on Beth Moore studies, so you need to get in there and start scrapping for some money in the men's ministry budget so you can buy some material. This is not out of line with what other curricula like this would cost. That's fair. The books are $10. The books are $10 for the guys, $9.95. And like I said, you can usually buy them at Lifeway, but my experience with Lifeway is that they don't keep much of this on stock. Okay? So that's another thing. Now, I could do more on that. Let me take you back to the men's fraternity website. Because when you go here to, let's see, products, Leaders Center. If you're a men's fraternity leader, Leader's Guide, promotional tools, FAQs, frequently asked questions, they will do everything they can to help you succeed. Their whole goal at men's fraternity is to see these groups impacting men. And it's just exciting. I'm going to pass this around. If you'll give me your name and address, I'll send you a follow-up package and also where your church is from. Let me tell you let me share you some fun stuff here. I'm going to turn this off because at the end of the quest, the deal is you have to turn in your manhood plan. Now, a lot of guys, I was surprised. I thought nobody's going to sit down and write up a plan for their manhood. But I've got files full of them, where men, at the conclusion of this curriculum, will take stock of all of this and say, this is how I'm going to live out my manhood. This is how I'm going to change the way my marriage is going. This is how I'm going to change my parenting. And when you read that a man has said things like, I want to be the one that prays with my children to receive Christ. That's powerful stuff. I'm going to start to date my wife. I'm going to make sure that my mom understands that I can stand on my own 2 feet. Or I'm going to go confront my dad and ask him face to face, toe to toe, do you love me? That's a powerful moment in a lot of men's lives. Because there are lots of guys who've never heard their dad say that they love them. In winning at work and home, guys have to turn in 10 key moves. 10 key moves, things that they're going to do as a result of having participated in winning at work and home. Here's one guy's 10 key moves. I'll just read them to you. Partner with another Christian family to exchange children so each couple can enjoy an outing together. Here's a guy who said, I need to date my wife, but I can't do it because we can't afford childcare. So he's looking for a creative solution. That's not bad thinking for a guy. He gets a point for that, doesn't he? Yeah, he gets 2 points for that. Okay. Number 2, he says, establish a winning strategy for dating my wife, which includes the following: weekly meetings, monthly dates, and a yearly getaway. So he is going to take responsibility for planning these times when he can invest in building his relationship with his wife. That's pretty cool to hear a guy saying that. Partner with my wife to establish a game plan for raising godly children. Wow. Find a way to conduct a personal assessment to find blind spots in my life. Write a love letter to my wife in the unfortunate event that an accident would happen to me. Listen, Robert Lewis tells a story of a man who got a call from his wife saying that she'd been in an accident. And this guy had her car was messed up. She had to get the registration card out. She was okay. But when she opened the glove box, in the glove box with the registration card was a letter to his wife that said, sweetheart, if you're in here, that means something has happened. I want you to know that everything's okay. I love you. It's all going to be all right. So, wow, what forethought this guy had. Another guy wrote a letter to his wife and put it in their safety deposit box and said, sweetheart, if you're opening this box, that means that something's happened to me. And I want you to know that I've loved you so much, and on and on. But then he says, here are my closest friends. They're the ones who are going to help you deal with the fact that I'm not here. Here are our financial advisors. Here are our insurance policies. These are all the numbers. Here are the numbers on the accounts for all of our investments and everything. And here's what you need to do next. Wow. Is that a man loving his wife the way Christ loved the church? That's pretty cool stuff. Find a way to negotiate a healthy pace at work and lead a balanced life that allows for more energy at work and home. Reinitiate praying daily with my wife. Find a time that will work for both of us and stick with it. Bring God to work by creating a network with other Christians at work in which we would meet weekly to regularly encourage each other. You know, this is a guy who says, these are the things that I'm going to do in my life as a result of having been through this study. And then what happens is the group of guys who partnered with him in that discussion are going to hold him accountable to that. Would our churches be stronger if more men were doing this type of stuff? Yeah. It's worth doing. Let me tell you one other thing, and then I'll answer some more questions. I love this. Now, why do I love it? It makes noise, that's right. This is a chain, but it's a very symbolic chain. Does anybody know what this is? What it's called? It's a carabiner. What are carabiners used for? Climbing, rock climbing. You got one for your keys. Why do you need these when you're climbing? Stability, to connect, to clip into something so that you can connect to safety, right? Something stable. When guys finish men's fraternity and they give me their manhood plan, this is their graduation gift. We celebrate it, and I give them a carabiner. Now, this carabiner is symbolic because it reminds them that, first of all, they need to be connected to Jesus Christ, the rock. But secondly, they need to be connected to other men. Has dog tags on it. These are real stainless steel, rolled edge military dog tags pressed on a genuine military dog tag machine, and they have the definition of authentic manhood on it. Now listen to this definition. I've played around with what is a real man. Authentic men, it says, reject passivity. Is that a good quality for men? Real men accept responsibility. Is that a good quality for men? Real men lead courageously. Is that a good quality for men? And real men expect the greater reward, God's reward. Let me ask you this. If every man in your church understood this definition of manhood and would live by it, would your church be different? If every man who has a teenage son would teach his son this definition of manhood and would hold him accountable to it, would that change a man's life, a young man's life? Absolutely. That's what it gets me excited about this curriculum. Now, when I give this to guys, I say, okay, I give you dog tags because you're a soldier in a battle. What do dog tags do for military personnel? They identify them. You're identified now as an authentic man. You know what a man is, so you go live that way. And I'm holding you accountable for it. That resonates in the hearts of men. And then what I tell them is, don't just put this in your pocket, hang this on your rearview mirror. Because what I want to do one day is walk into Lowe's, or I want to pull into a Lowe's parking lot or Home Depot parking lot, or anywhere I go, Best Buy, Circuit City, I want to see those carabiners hanging in the windows of those cars. Because what does that mean? There's some real men in there. They're men that I know what they stand for, and I know who they are. And I'm going to tell you what, this gets guys going. Why do I show it like this? Connection. This year, there were about 250 of these links on this chain. I put this together, and as many of the groups as I can go to, as many of those 40 groups as I can go to, and I take it in a bucket, and I stand there, and I pull it out. And say, guys, if you turn in your manhood plan, I'll give you a link off of this chain. And you need to see that it's connected to every other man in Central Virginia that's been through this curriculum. So you're part of this chain. And you know what? That sounds goofy and kooky, but that gets guys excited. So you get the dog tags when you finish the quest. When you finish winning at work and home, you get a carabiner with a cross on it. And this little bronze cross has the term for winning at work on home on it, which is die to live. What did Christ do for us? He died so that we could live. If I want to live well, what must I do? Die to self. If any man would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. You've got to die in order to live. You'll notice some of the Noble Warrior shirts that are out on the table. Some of you may not have figured out what that's for. There's a little D2L in a circle. What do you think that stands for? Die to live. You see another man's got that on his chest? Die to live. It's the only way to make it in this world as a Christ follower. When you get through the third one, get a little token here, because the third session of Men's Fraternity, The Great Adventure, is based on the life of Caleb. And there's a story at near the end of this book of Joshua where Caleb and Joshua kind of have this conversation about the fact that Caleb and Joshua, really, they've been conquering the promised land, but they don't have their piece. And they're talking about 2 pieces of land that are available. And Caleb says, I'm 80 years old. I've been fighting for 40 years. But I'm just as vigorous now as I was the day we started this, and I want the high ground. So at 80 years old, he's still doing battle. And the men, as we age, as we mature, we never get beyond doing battle in the kingdom. How does that resonate with General Jerry Boykin's comments this morning? It's powerful stuff. So you get a token then that says, Men's Fraternity, take the land, the great adventure, give me the high ground. To remember that throughout your life, if you're going to live as an authentic man, you're going to go after the high ground. The morally high ground, the spiritually high ground as you live out this adventure. All of that just kind of resonates with men. And let me tell you something. Just Thursday, day before yesterday, I was speaking at a women's ministry event. I speak at women's ministry events because that's how I get to men. So I connect with wives. And this lady came up to me and she said, my husband participates in men's fraternity at another church. I didn't even know this church was doing it. And she said, well, you would not believe the difference it's made in my husband and our marriage. Now let me tell you something. Your men's ministry is really doing something when the women start talking about it. That's where we need to be. If the women are coming to you and saying, what you're doing with my husband is changing our house, that's the real deal. Now, men's fraternity, here's what I'd like for you to do. I'll get your information. I'll send you a follow-up packet. It may take me a couple of weeks to get it to you because, quite honestly, I'm tired. After 3 of these conferences, I'm about spent. So I'm going to try to catch my breath, and then I'll get some information to you. And I'd like to plan to come up here maybe in late April or early May. And if some of you would like to get together at a church or something, maybe on a Thursday night, and I'll take you through a men's fraternity session or something, answer some more questions, give you some more training about how to do men's fraternity. Man, I'd love to see 10 groups started up in Fredericksburg in the coming year. By that time, I'll also know the answer to whether or not we could do this licensing for a church to give them a code, to have a church code where, X number of people could watch it or download it to a pod or something like that, iPod. Does that sound reasonable? Guys, what other questions do you have for me about men's fraternity? Yes, sir.
Now, I noticed on your information, you mentioned about pastors being men. What about a church who has a woman pastor?
Whew. I have to be careful with that. And here's, I think women are in the pastorate because men have not accepted the responsibility that they should have. Now, I don't know what to tell you about that if your pastor is a woman. Yeah, but there may be some in here that fit that category. But I got to tell you, from my gut, I would find it hard to be called out to manhood by a woman pastor. That's just my gut. But I think if that's the case in the local church, then hopefully the lady pastor would have the foresight to make sure that there is a strong men's ministry leader and would see the value in the strength of that men's ministry. I think the danger would be a woman pastor I would see having a tendency to lean more and more toward the feminine side of spiritual life. And that would become more and more uncomfortable to men, and what you would see in that environment is less and less men, quite honestly, who look like men and act like men. Does that make sense?
The reason I asked that because I went to a conference a few years ago, and the pastor was female. She spoke at the first meeting, and she thought somebody would step up and take it over, and they just let her do it. You know, they said they rather for her to continue, and she said, I will, but. Step up and take it.
Read that first line again. What does it say? What does it say?
Oh, which one, the dog tag?
Mm-hmm.
Authentic men reject passivity.
Reject passivity. What did you have in that environment with that female pastor? A bunch of passive men. A bunch of passive men. And I think that's the danger of where we are. Too many men just letting things happen. Hey, we're passive in our homes. That's why our daughters are leaving dressed the way they are.
And our sons.
And our sons are doing the things they're doing. Absolutely. Because we're passive. That's my thought on that. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Do you have any trouble getting the men to pay the $10 for the books?
You know what? Yeah, I have trouble getting churches. Let me tell you what else.
We had that problem. We couldn't get anybody to buy the book.
I've had churches I've had hundreds of dollars worth of material in their hand because I started inventorying this stuff because I could put it in people's hands. I've got churches who owe me money. And this ministry, Noble Warriors, is an independent ministry. We don't have anybody bankrolling this. So if Mike Young doesn't get money into the ministry coffers, then Mike Young's family doesn't get a paycheck. So, but you know what? All I can do in either of those cases is do what I think God's leading me to do. And I would not let a $10 book stand in the way of not having somebody participate in this. And just pray that God would convict them to pay up.
Well, what we ended up doing was, I was leading and I would run copies of that each week and hand out copies to all the guys because they wouldn't buy the book. I had one book, you know, I bought a book.
How did you tell them to go to the store and buy the book?
Oh, yeah.
See, what I would do in that situation, what I've done, I mean, I've had hundreds of these books in my office. What I would do is buy the books and have them there and tell the guys, you bring your $10 bill next week and I'll give you a book. Right. Yeah, I think that's the way you go with it. That's why I try to inventory this material. Now, I'm out right now, but I try to inventory this material because if I get into a conversation with a church and they say, hey, man, I want to have that, then I tell you what, though, I don't know that I'm going to give any more away without a church. Check, at least it's $300 worth of CDs, DVDs, because that gets kind of tough. But I think to make it as easy as possible without letting them off the hook is the way to do that. I would have the books there. Does that make sense? Other questions about men's fraternity? Guys, I really do, in my heart, believe that this is, if it's not the best product on the market, then it's pretty doggone close. I have seen, and I'll just tell you one other thing. You ask about ages. One night, I'll tell you two quick stories. One night, we were talking about 25 ways to be a servant leader. It's one of the sessions in winning the Quest for Authentic Manhood. And a 70-year-old man whose wife had just died. We were talking about the things that you need to do as a husband. That man, who was a widower, turned around to all of the guys in that room at the conclusion and said, Mike, I want to say something. He said, my wife has been dead for 14 months, I think. I can't even remember exactly what he said. And tears welled up in his eyes, and he started to cry. And he said, every night, now that she's gone, I fix myself a little something to eat, and I sit down at the table across from the chair that she used to sit in. And I weep as I think about the thousands of meals she prepared for me that I never thanked her for. Now let me tell you, there were about 20 guys in there in their late 20s to 40s. You think their wives got thanked that night for the things that they were doing? Is that a wise man speaking into the life of a young man? And man, we need that. Let me tell you another story. I had a guy after the father wound. just anger on his face. This guy's walking with Christ. He serves overseas in missions and all sorts of things. And one time he said, Mike, I hate it when I get up in the mirror and look at myself in the morning. And I said, why? He said, because I look like my dad. And my dad left my family when I was 3 years old. And every day, I get up and I look in the mirror and I hate my dad. That man's been carrying that bitterness for a long time. It is poison. And you know what? That gave him an environment to have a conversation about that and see some healing. Men, we need it. When a man stands and looks at me and says, Mike, I played baseball. I was an all-star year after year after year. And when I came off the field, the only thing my dad ever said to me was, if you'd have struck out one more batter, we'd have won the game. If you hadn't have pulled it beyond the foul line, you'd have got it over the fence and hit a home run. You'd have won the game. Dad never congratulated him, never said he loved him. And so when I hand him that token and shake his hand and tell him I love him and I'm proud of him, and tears stream down his face, and he says, Mike, I've never had another man tell me he loved me. Wow. We need that in the church, men. We need it desperately. Let me pray over us and we'll go. Father, thank you for these men. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the opportunity to share this information with them. And God, I pray that you will help them to, if men's fraternity isn't the product and Noble Warriors isn't the connection, God, I pray that you will help them to find the system or the product or the strategy that works for them in their church to disciple their men, to be true followers of Christ. God, I pray your blessings on these men as they lead other men. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, 15 minutes and then we'll go into our last session. Hey, I just want to tell you, I've had a blast here today, and I'm excited that this has gone, it seems as well as it has. So thank you all for coming out and being a part of this. The clipboard is right over there. Make sure, hey, if you want to see any of these, look at these things right there. They make a lot of noise, but that's very cool.
It's kind of funny, medallion of Taylor. And my wife's culture, she's from New Zealand. I don't know if you're familiar with the Maori or not. That's exactly what their hockey was.
Oh, really?
It had to be a